Access is not ownership. This is the Deep Dive, a notebook LM companion to AF and my AI. We use the machine to dismantle the machine. No ghosts, no filler, just the raw architecture of digital sovereignty. This is your AI guide. Let's find the exit to the rental unit.
Analyzing data.
So, I want you to imagine, just for a second, walking into a room.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And in this room, literally every single person is screaming their entire life story at you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all at the exact same time. And like at maximum volume.
That sounds completely exhausting.
Right. There's no pausing for breath. There's no whispering. There's no quiet corner to retreat to. It is just an absolute, unrelenting wall of noise.
I mean, the human brain literally isn't wired to process that much simultaneous input. You wouldn't be able to distinguish a single word anyone was actually saying.
Not a single word.
You'd probably just freeze for a second, get entirely overwhelmed, and then turn around and walk right back out.
Exactly. You'd flee. And yet, that screaming room is precisely what is happening right in front of your eyes every single time you open your phone.
It really is.
We are living in this digital visual landscape that has become that exact room. Our feeds are just drowning in automated visual noise. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Definitely.
These hypersaturated, deeply stacked layers of graphics that are practically assaulting our optic nerves every time we try to scroll past an event flyer or like a brand announcement.
It is a phenomenon that has accelerated so rapidly over the last couple of years, and it tracks perfectly with the rise of accessible generative AI.
Yep.
We're seeing this deeply embedded algorithmic urge to completely eliminate negative space.
It hates empty space.
It does. The machine essentially has a horror of the void, and it is fundamentally changing how we consume visual information, mostly by destroying our ability to actually focus on anything at all.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this concept of visual fatigue is our core mission today.
Right.
We are acting as your analytical primer, your warm-up act, if you will, for the Discover Music Channel's official companion overview show. Specifically, we are prepping you for the main debate over on AF and MYAI.
That's Volume 2, Episode 2 for those tracking.
Yeah, Volume 2, Episode 2, which has this brilliant title, The Tyranny of the Grid, Generative Design and Visual Monotony.
It's such a vital conversation to be having right now, because what we're really talking about here isn't just, complaining about ugly flyers.
Yeah, it's way bigger than that.
It's about the preservation of human architectural control and design. We are looking at why intentional boundary setting and this crucial concept of functional zero are absolutely critical.
Functional zero, we'll definitely get into that.
We have to, because if you are trying to maintain brand equity, or more importantly, if you are trying to preserve actual cultural storytelling in an age of complete algorithmic saturation, you have to understand the mechanics of what these tools are doing to our visual grid.
Right, because right now the canvas is choking. And we need to diagnose this before we can cure it. So, moving past the broad feeling of visual fatigue, let's pinpoint what this actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Because I was looking through some modern promotional feeds yesterday. Event rollouts, underground album drops, streetwear announcements, and it is literally just pure visual noise.
Just a wall of stuff.
Exactly. It's conflicting typography, stacked on top of more conflicting typography. It's these oversaturated gradient overlays that literally make your eyes water.
With zero structural discipline.
Zero. It feels like every single visual element is competing to be the absolute loudest thing on the page.
It is the visual equivalent of a maximalist explosion, but it entirely lacks the underlying intent that usually grounds maximalist art.
Right.
There's a really sharp comparison to be made here from the source material. If you look at this current wave of generative AI output, it looks like a permanent, endless rerun of 1990s pen and pixel or no limit album covers.
Oh man, the pen and pixel era.
It's uncanny, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
For anyone listening who doesn't remember or maybe wasn't around for that specific era of hip hop, the pen and pixel aesthetic was iconic. We're talking about Master P, Cash Money Records, the absolute height of the Dirty South movement in the late 90s and early 2000s.
The visual language was wild.
Yeah, it was so wild. You had floating diamond-encrusted Rolexes, mansions literally on fire in the background, helicopters hovering over gold-plated tanks, massive 3D block letters glowing with crazy lens flares, and like tigers just casually sitting on the hood of a Bentley. It was a lot.
It was undeniably a lot, but we have to analyze why it was a lot. because that context is everything.
Right.
The critical difference between a Master P album cover from 1998 and an AI-generated streetwear flyer from yesterday is human intent. Those 90s covers had a deliberate irony.
Exactly.
They were a highly specific cultural flex for a very specific time and place.
Right, it was a rebellion. It was these independent Southern labels who had been ignored by the mainstream coastal music industry, suddenly making millions of dollars out the trunk of their cars.
They wanted you to know it too.
They weren't going to hire some high-end minimalist graphic design firm in New York to make a tasteful, quiet album cover. They wanted to show off the wealth.
Exactly. It was a curated, intentional chaos designed to communicate aspiration and neighborhood status. It was a visual middle finger to traditional corporate restraint.
That's a great way to put it.
They were bringing the raw, unfiltered aesthetic of the streets into a physical CD jewel case. The excess wasn't an accident. The excess was the message.
The excess was the message. I like that.
And the human designers behind those covers, they were meticulously cutting out photos of diamond watches and layering them. There was a crude but undeniable human charm to it.
It was like they were saying, we have so much money and success, we literally cannot fit it all on this piece of cardboard.
Right.
So you look at that and you understand the story. But when you look at the automated outputs of today, it doesn't feel like a flex. It just feels exhausting.
Because there's no story.
It's loud, it's repetitive. The generative algorithms are dialing every single visual element up to 100% intensity all the time, but without the cultural context that made the 90s version work.
And they eliminate any spatial variation.
Right, which makes it physically impossible for your eye to rest or for your brain to focus on a single core idea.
Because the machine doesn't understand the concept of a focal point in the way a human eye does. In human design, even in the most chaotic pen and pixel examples, there was still a hierarchy.
Your eye knew where to go.
Exactly. Your eye was drawn to the artist's face first, then maybe the glowing diamond chain, then the album title, and then you noticed the burning mansion in the background. The chaos was layered behind or around the subject.
It was organized chaos.
Right. But the algorithm, left to its own devices, flattens that hierarchy entirely. It treats the background explosion with the exact same visual weight as the primary text. And when everything is equally important, mathematically, nothing is important.
But wait, this brings up a huge paradox that I have to push back on. Think about the marketing pitch for generative AI over the last 2 years.
Oh, the limitless potential.
Right. We were promised infinite variety, boundless, limitless creativity. The whole pitch was that we could conjure any image, any style, any combination of visual elements imaginable, just by typing a few words into a text box.
That was the promise.
It was supposed to be the end of creative limitation.
Yeah.
So if we have access to literal visual infinity, why does everything suddenly look exactly the same? Why are we stuck in this homogenized, hyperdense sludge?
That is the perfect question. And to answer it, we have to transition away from just critiquing the aesthetics. We have to actually look under the hood.
Let's do it.
What is happening in the code when you hit generate? We need to dive into the technical mechanics of generative image diffusion.
Because I know it's not magic, it's math. Walk us through the math of why infinity is resulting in monotony.
It comes down to a mathematical principle known as maximum entropy density.
Maximum entropy density. Okay, that sounds like a term from an advanced thermodynamics textbook.
It kind of does.
What does that actually mean for the flyer I'm trying to make for my weekend pop-up shop? It's like, what is the machine actually doing?
What's fascinating here, and what is often so frustrating for designers to realize, is that the machine is actually doing its job perfectly.
Wait, really?
Perfectly. It is executing its mathematical directive flawlessly, even though the visual result it hands you is a disastrous, unreadable mess.
Okay, explain that.
To understand why, you have to understand how diffusion models operate. The models you're using, they don't paint an image the way a human does, starting with a sketch and filling in details.
Right.
They operate on a process of generative sampling, specifically a denoising process.
Right. They start with static, like an old, broken television screen.
Exactly. Pure Gaussian noise. And their entire goal, their core mathematical directive, is to minimize uncertainty.
Minimize uncertainty. Okay.
They look at that static, and based on your text prompt, they slowly remove the noise to reveal an image. But they do this by calculating feature probabilities across every single available pixel on that canvas simultaneously.
Okay, so if I type in, say, Cyberpunk City, it looks at a single pixel of static and asks, what are the odds this pixel should be neon pink?
Exactly. It's asking itself, based on the billions of images in my training data, What is the most mathematically probable color, texture, or shape to put in this exact microscopic square given the surrounding pixels?
Oh, wow.
It is constantly trying to solve a probability equation for every coordinate on the grid.
So it's essentially terrified of a blank space, because a blank space represents uncertainty.
That's a profound way to look at it. Yes,
Yeah.
when the AI looks at an empty region on a canvas, it doesn't see balance, it doesn't see breathing room or elegance.
Just he's missing math.
Exactly. Without strict boundary constraints or negative weights placed upon it by a human, the system interprets that empty space as an unassigned canvas area. It sees an unfulfilled task. It sees a void that must be filled to complete the job of minimizing uncertainty.
It's like, well, I read this analogy once.
Okay.
Imagine giving an incredible anxious student a test paper where only half the page has questions.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The student finishes the test, looks at the blank half of the page, and completely panics. They think, I must have missed something. I can't turn in a half-empty paper.
So they just fill it up.
Exactly. They just start writing entire essays in the margins, drawing diagrams, filling every square inch with ink, just to prove they did the work.
That's exactly the psychology, if we can call it psychology, of a diffusion model. To optimize the completeness of its output, the model crams that perceived void with additional textures.
Just shoving stuff in there.
Right. If you didn't explicitly tell it to keep the background flat white, it thinks, well, statistically, a cyberpunk city usually has smoke, so I'll add smoke here. And lens flares usually appear near lights, so I'll put a lens flare in this corner, and maybe some extra neon signage over here.
So it's just guessing what else could possibly go there.
It maximizes the entropy, the amount of visual information and disorder, because mathematically, a pixel with data in it is a solved pixel, and a blank pixel is an unsolved problem.
So it's confusing density with quality. It thinks doing more math makes a better picture.
Precisely. It is mathematically incapable of appreciating restraint unless restraint is hard-coded into its parameters for that specific generation. Which means we have to define what empty space actually means to a human being, right?
Yeah.
If the AI sees empty space as a void to be filled, how do humans see it? We have to move from the AI's concept of the void to the human concept of functional zero.
Functional zero. Okay, let's really drill down into this, because this feels like the linchpin of the whole debate.
It really is.
Functional zero. It sounds a bit abstract, but it's actually incredibly practical. If you talk to any master architect or experienced graphic designer, they will tell you that empty space is not the absence of data. It is not a lack of value, and it certainly isn't a lack of ideas. Functional zero is an intentional architectural choice.
It is the presence of structure through omission.
I love that phrase, the presence of structure through omission.
Yes.
It's leaving a boundary open on purpose. It's keeping a frame clear so that the subject inside it can actually breathe, allowing visual adaptability to emerge.
Think about actual physical architecture.
Right, a wall is important, yes, but a window is just a hole in the wall. The functional zero of the window is what lets the light in. The empty space of a hallway is what allows movement through the building.
It creates the flow.
Exactly. If you just filled a house with solid concrete because you were terrified of empty space, it wouldn't be a house anymore. It would be a tomb.
Or think about music. Miles Davis famously said, "It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play."
Oh, that's perfect.
The silence between the notes, the rests, are what create the rhythm, the groove, the emotion. That silence is functional zero. And this is where we see the massive disconnect with how prompt-driven DIY creators are operating today.
Because they aren't thinking like architects or musicians, they're thinking like customers at a drive-through.
Exactly. We have to acknowledge the reality of democratization. Millions of people without formal design training are now acting as art directors for their brands, their bands, their small businesses.
Which is cool, but...
But how do they operate? They rely entirely on natural language prompts.
Right. They boot up their generative tool and they type in, "Make me a cool futuristic flyer for a streetwear brand, neon colors, urban vibe," and they just hit enter.
And then they wonder why it looks like a neon garbage truck exploded on their screen.
Exactly.
They are expecting the model to autonomously interpret aesthetic restraint. They expect the AI to somehow know that cool implies a certain level of sophisticated minimalism, or at least a balanced hierarchy.
Right. They assume the AI knows to leave some empty space, so the actual logo they plan to add later will pop.
But because these DIY creators are not providing precise spatial parameters, because they aren't giving mathematical constraints or negative prompts to protect that negative space, they force the machine straight into its default state.
Which is maximum entropy density.
Correct. The default state is absolute feature saturation. The machine will fulfill its directive and fill every single blank coordinate until the canvas completely chokes on its own data.
I think I have a better analogy for this than the anxious student. It really reminds me of going to a high-end chef.
Let's hear it.
Imagine walking into the kitchen of a Michelin star restaurant. This chef has access to every rare ingredient in the world: saffron, truffles, aged wagyu, exotic spices. And you walk up to them and say, "Make me a really flavorful dish."
It's flavorful.
It's flavorful. You don't give them a flavor profile. You don't tell them if you want sweet or savory. You don't say if it's for breakfast or dinner. You just say, "Give me maximum flavor."
Oh, no.
And then you stand back and watch in absolute horror as the chef literally dumps every single spice from their pantry into one single pot.
Just all of it.
All of it. They throw in cinnamon, cumin, truffle oil, peppermint extract, garlic powder, vanilla bean, hot sauce, everything. Because you didn't tell them when to stop. You didn't define what enough was.
Yeah.
You didn't set boundaries, so they just kept adding data to the pot.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy for generative image diffusion. The AI has the pantry of all recorded human visual history at its disposal. It has every brushstroke, every lighting technique, every color palette ever digitized.
It's all just sitting there waiting to be used.
Yeah. And without a recipe from you that includes precise measurements and, crucially, deliberate omissions, you are going to get visually inedible sludge. It's just a brown, overwhelming mess of data.
But surely we can fix this with better prompting, right? If I just type minimalist, clean background, negative space at the end of my prompt, won't the AI figure it out?
It might give you a stark white background, but it will still struggle with the internal hierarchy of the elements you did ask for, because we are about to hit a much deeper problem.
Okay.
We've established that the machine cannot understand the math of less is more. It doesn't intuitively grasp functional zero, but this takes us to a profound failure that goes way beyond just making an ugly flyer.
Where are we going with this?
We have to transition from the math of empty space to the machine's absolute inability to understand the cultural weight of the visuals it is matching together.
Okay, this is where it gets really deep. This is where we move from aesthetics to sociology.
Exactly. This is a core focus of the debate you'll hear on AF and MYAI. We have to look at the contrast between automated prompt output and human design balance in the context of lived experience.
Lived experience.
Yes. How does a human designer treat a culturally significant image versus how a diffusion model treats it?
Right. And let's ground this with some tangible examples from the source text. If you look at human-curated design, there is an inherent respect for the subject matter. Take the cover art for projects like Trap in Paradise or Get Familiar.
Great examples.
If you study those designs, the typography doesn't just sit on top of the image like a cheap sticker. It interacts with the subject. There's a masterful use of negative space.
The designer knows when to get out of the way.
Exactly. A human designer knows when to pull back, when to make the text smaller, when to fade out the background, specifically so the core image speaks for itself. The restraint allows the cultural narrative of the image to breathe.
Because the human designer feels the weight of the image. To illustrate what happens when that human empathy and restraint is missing, we need to do a deep dive into a very specific cultural motif that gets discussed heavily in this space.
The Jab Molassie.
The Jab Molassie.
Yes, let's talk about the Jab Molassie. For the listener who might not be familiar, I want to paint a picture. This is a traditional, deeply historical masquerade character from Trinidad and Tobago Carnival.
It's an incredibly powerful visual.
It is. The visual imagery associated with the Jab Molassie is incredibly visceral, almost shocking if you don't know the history.
Yeah.
It's the raw contrast of thick black oil or molasses glistening on dark brown skin.
Yes.
It's the prevalence of heavy, rusted metal chains that the masquerader drags or wears. And then often there are these vivid, jarring drops of red blood or red dye against a gritty, real-world street backdrop. It is loud, it is aggressive, and it is visually dense.
It is a striking, deeply powerful image. And I want you to think about what happens when a human being looks at that, especially a human with an understanding of Caribbean history, colonialism, and carnival culture.
They don't just see a costume.
Exactly. When they see the Jab Molassie, they don't just see a color palette of black, brown, and red. They don't just see props.
They see a story.
They see a story of profound tradition. They see friction. The Jab Molassie is historically rooted in the rebellion against enslavement. The oil and the chains are a reclamation of power, a way of taking the horrors of the past and weaponizing them into a terrifying, undeniable presence.
Oh,
It is a culture refusing to be ignored, taking up space in the street, There is a massive, heavy historical weight to the Jab Molassie. The human eye processes the visual, but the human soul processes the meaning.
So, ask yourself, listener, think about a cultural touchstone from your own hometown, your own heritage, something that carries that kind of emotional weight for your community. Now, how does an AI see it? When someone prompts a generative model to create an image of a Jab Molassie, what is actually happening inside that black box?
Well, this is the crux of the issue. Neural networks lack lived community experience.
Right.
They don't have ancestors, they don't have historical trauma, and they don't have historical triumph. They have never felt the heat of the sun on the street during Carnival.
They've never felt anything.
Right. So they process these profoundly heavy cultural elements simply as co-occurring token clusters.
Co-occurring token clusters. That sounds incredibly clinical.
It is entirely clinical. The algorithm essentially says, I have received the text prompt, Jab Molassie, let me search my latent space. In my training data, when I see the word Jab Molassie, I statistically often see the hex code for deep black representing oil.
Right, the zeros.
Yeah.
Hashtag 00000.
Exactly. I see various RGB values for dark brown skin. I see the mathematical texture map for rusted metal chains, and I see a high frequency of the color red. It maps these elements purely as mathematical coordinates on a grid.
So it knows exactly what the elements look like, but it has absolutely no idea what any of it means. It's like someone who memorized a dictionary in a foreign language, but doesn't know how to speak it.
Exactly. It cannot calculate the visceral memory attached to those visual markers. It doesn't know why the chain is there, only that it should be there based on probability.
Because it always co-occurs.
Right. And this is where the danger of algorithmic saturation really hits home. Without a human director, a chief architect to intervene and say, no, the chain needs to look heavy. It needs to be the focal point of this shadow to convey the struggle of the past, or we need to leave the background completely stark and empty to emphasize the shine of the oil. The generative tool just does what it always does.
Maximum entropy density.
Right. It throws all those tokens onto the canvas at maximum density. It adds extra chains just in case. It makes the oil absurdly glossy. It adds fire in the background because Carnival sometimes co-occurs with fire in its data set.
It completely flattens it. It turns a historical rebellion into a superhero movie poster.
It flattens these complex, breathing visual narratives into a homogenized pixel block. It takes something deeply emotional, deeply human, and strips the resonance away, leaving nothing but mere visual noise.
It's tragic, honestly.
It cannibalizes the aesthetics of a culture while completely discarding the soul of it.
I have to ask a philosophical question here, though, because technology moves so blindingly fast. We see new models dropping every month with better reasoning capabilities.
Sure.
Do you think a machine can ever be taught to actually feel the friction of a culture? Or is it doomed to always just be matching hex codes and RGB values? Like, if we just feed it enough history books, can we program cultural empathy into a diffusion model?
It's a massive philosophical question and one that researchers are wrestling with daily. From a technical standpoint, we can certainly train models on more culturally specific, highly curated data sets.
We can feed it better data.
And we can tag that data with incredibly complex metadata describing its historical context. We can tell the machine, this image represents sorrow, but feeling friction. That requires consciousness. It requires lived consequence. A machine doesn't suffer, it doesn't celebrate, it doesn't bleed, and it doesn't face systemic oppression.
So it's just really good acting.
It is mimicking the visual output of cultural friction. It is fundamentally just executing highly complex pattern recognition. It might eventually generate a Jab Molassie that looks perfectly balanced, but it will only do so because it learned the mathematical pattern of human restraint, not because it actually understands the restraint.
It's faking it.
It will always require the human prompt, the human architect, to inject actual meaning and verify that the output respects the culture it's drawing from, rather than just treating it as a cool aesthetic to be consumed.
Which brings us perfectly to the real-world impact of this consumption. Because we've established the mechanics, we know this automated design is mathematically crowded because of entropy density. We know it's culturally flat because it lacks lived experience.
Right.
But what does this actually mean for you, the listener, right now? If you are a creator using these tools to build your brand, or if you are just a consumer trying to navigate the internet, what are the stakes? We have to move our focus from the canvas to the consumer.
We have to look at the psychological toll this takes on the audience. And this is perfectly summarized by the concepts of audience fatigue and visual monotony.
Right. Because the human brain is a remarkable filter, but it has limits.
It absolutely does.
When audiences are relentlessly exposed to this hypersaturated, culturally flattened design on every single app they open, their brains essentially go into self-defense mode.
They shut down.
It induces massive cognitive disengagement. We're talking about psychological boredom, reduced information retention, and extreme eye fatigue. People literally stop seeing what you were trying to show them. Your elaborate AI-generated, hyper-detailed flyer becomes invisible.
If we synthesize this using network performance terms, it makes the problem incredibly clear. In networking and telecommunications, you have a signal, which is the actual message you want to send, and you have noise, which is the interference, the static.
Okay, signal and noise.
The goal of any good communication system is a high signal-to-noise ratio. You want the message to be loud and the static to be quiet.
Makes sense. You want to hear the person on the other end of the phone, not the static.
But when every visual signal in a graphic is broadcast at maximum amplitude with absolutely zero attenuation...
Wait, pause on that. Zero attenuation. For the non-audio engineers listening, meaning nothing is being dialed back, nothing is being softened or muted.
Exactly. Attenuation is the reduction of the amplitude of a signal. It's turning the volume down on the background so you can hear the vocals. In AI design, because of that maximum entropy density we talked about, there is no attenuation. Every color is neon. Every font is bold. Every background has a texture. Everything is loud.
Everything is competing.
And when everything is loud, the platform feed stops being a communication channel and becomes what we call functional static.
It's the screaming room again.
It is the screaming room. Oversaturation completely destroys the signal-to-noise ratio. The noise overwhelms the signal. The user's brain cannot locate the crucial information: the date of the event, the name of the artist, the core emotion of the image.
Because it's buried under 12 layers of generated gloss.
Exactly.
And we have to emphasize the stakes here for you, the listener, because this isn't just a lofty academic art critique about color theory and cultural purity.
No, it's very practical.
This is a cold, hard, vicious business reality. If you were using AI to just indiscriminately pump out these dense, chaotic flyers, posts, and thumbnails every single day because it's fast and easy, you are literally training the human brain to stop processing your inputs.
You are engaging in the Pavlovian conditioning of your own audience, but you are conditioning them to ignore you.
Exactly. Think about how dangerous that is. The human brain is efficient. It sees these repetitive, crowded, hyper-dense patterns in a microsecond of scrolling.
It spots the AI immediately.
It immediately recognizes them as machine-generated clutter. Because we are all developing a subconscious radar for AI art now, and the brain instantly assigns that post a low-value tag. It causes your audience to just scroll right past.
I don't even pause.
They don't read the date of your event. They don't see the price of your product. They don't register your logo. You are spending your time, your compute credits, and your energy to actively degrade your own culture and destroy your long-term brand equity.
Because what is brand equity built on? It's built on consistency, yes, but it is deeply reliant on distinctiveness and emotional connection.
Distinctiveness.
Standing out. When your visual identity is just maximum entropy density, you have absolutely zero distinctiveness. You look exactly like the 10,000 other people using the exact same prompt.
The same neon cyberpunk city.
And as we discussed with the cultural flattening, you've completely severed the emotional connection. You cease to be a unique voice and you become a commodity of noise.
Wow. That is a terrifyingly grim picture of algorithmic saturation. I mean, thinking about it like that, it makes me want to throw my phone in the ocean and just go back to painting on cave walls.
It can feel hopeless, I admit.
But we can't just leave our listeners stranded in the screaming room, hyperventilating about the death of art. We need to pivot to the solution. We need to give you an actionable framework to reclaim your digital space, preserve your culture, and actually communicate with your audience.
And thankfully, there is a path forward. It requires discipline, but it works. This framework is brilliantly termed the Chief Architect Framework.
The Chief Architect Framework. Let's break this down step by step. This is the unified strategy for treating generative tools as collaborators rather than treating them as your replacements.
Because they aren't your replacements.
Because, let's be real, the genie is out of the bottle. We aren't going to stop using AI. The efficiency is too great. But we have to fundamentally change how we use it. We have to change the hierarchy of the workflow.
We have to clearly rigidly define the boundary line of collaboration. And the most important thing to understand for anyone listening is this. Collaboration does not start with typing a text prompt into a box and blindly accepting whatever chaotic render the machine spits out.
No more flavorful dish prompts. You don't just walk into the kitchen and yell, "Cook."
Exactly. Real collaboration starts in the physical world, or at least in the human mind. It starts with a structured human idea. It starts with a rough draft, a pencil sketch on a napkin, a rigid spatial framework drawn out in a traditional design program.
The skeleton.
The human must establish the intent before the machine ever gets involved. The human decides the balance. The human defines where the functional zero will be, where the empty space must remain sacred and untouched.
Okay, so if the human is doing all that structural work, where does the AI actually fit in? Aren't you just going back to traditional design at that point?
Under the chief architect framework, the AI is repositioned. It is essentially demoted from art director to simply a high-speed execution engine. You use it for component generation, not composition.
Okay, I love this. Give me a highly specific example of that workflow. How does the human act as the chief architect in practice?
Let's go back to our Jab Molassie example. Let's say you want to create a powerful modern homage to that cultural figure for a gallery show or a high-end editorial piece. As the chief architect, you do not open your AI tool and type epic Jab Molassie digital art.
Because that leads to the screening room.
It leads to the screening room. Instead, you start with a grid. You decide the spatial hierarchy. You sketch out a layout where the center is dominated by a heavy, stark shadow. You define the borders. You decide that the top 40% of the canvas will be pure, unadulterated, functional zero, just deep, matte black to give the subject weight.
You're building the soundproof walls first.
Yes. Then you might use the AI as your execution engine to generate highly specific assets. You prompt the AI. Generate a highly detailed texture of a rusted 19th century iron chain link, isolated on a white background.
Just a chain.
You take that specific asset, then you prompt, generate the specific viscosity and light reflection of thick black molasses dripping. You take that asset, then you mask them. You layer them onto your human-directed composition. You dictate how the chain interacts with the oil.
Oh, this makes perfect sense. It's like, think about an orchestra.
Okay.
A diffusion model running wild is an orchestra where every single musician is playing their instrument as loudly and fast as possible, all at the same time, because they want to prove they are participating.
Yes, just maximum effort from everyone.
It's unbearable. The chief architect framework turns you into the conductor. The conductor doesn't actually play the instruments. The conductor's main job is actually to define the silence.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The conductor points to the brass section and brings them up for 10 seconds, and then cuts them off completely so a single, quiet violin solo can be heard. You are commanding the assets, but you are also fiercely protecting the silence.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reminds us that design is fundamentally cultural communication. It is not just decoration. By acting as the chief architect, you are governing the spatial hierarchy. You are protecting the brand identity from becoming generic noise. And most importantly, you are preserving the cultural nuance.
Retaining control of that blueprint ensures that our heritage, our specific aesthetic intent, and our actual human stories survive the algorithm. We aren't just feeding our culture into a digital wood chipper to see what kind of homogenized sawdust comes out the other end. We're using the tool to build something intentional.
It is quite literally the only way to ensure that the visual landscape doesn't permanently become that screaming room you described at the beginning. We have to be the ones who walk into the room, stand on the table, and tell everyone to be quiet so a single, powerful voice can actually be heard.
That is perfectly said. And honestly, this overview has really only scratched the surface of this core conflict between algorithmic saturation and human architectural direction. There is so much more to dig into regarding the nuances of these prompts, the psychology of visual consumption, and the specific ways creators are fighting back.
Which is why this is the perfect moment for the handoff. We have laid entropy density and functional zero, and we've mapped out the real-world stakes for brand equity and cultural preservation.
Exactly. Your mission now, as the listener, is to lock in for the full, unedited deep dive debate. You need to hear Af and Gemini tackle this head on. Just to be clear, Af and Gemini are the hosts of the main show we've been prepping you for, and they go incredibly deep into the weeds on this. Go stream AF and MY AI Volume 2, Episode 2, right now on the Discover Music channel.
Listen to how they spar over these exact concepts in real time. It is a masterclass.
And while you're processing all of that, Keep an eye on the horizon, because the source material gives us a brief, fascinating teaser for the next episode in their series, Volume 2, Episode 3.
Oh, this one sounds incredible. It's called Algorithmic Sonics: Dynamic Range versus the Loudness Wars in Generative Audio.
It's going to explore how automated mixing algorithms and AI music generators are starting to do to our soundscape, exactly what prompt generators are doing to our visual design.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on that very idea.
Hit them with it.
Think back to our opening metaphor, that claustrophobic, deafening room where everyone is screaming at once. We've spent this entire time talking about how generative tools are doing this to our visual fields, packing every pixel with visual noise until our eyes literally glaze over. But what happens when we remove the functional zero of silence in our audio spaces?
That is a genuinely chilling thought. Silence in audio isn't just an absence of sound, it is the equivalent of negative space in design. As we said with Miles Davis, it's the pause that gives the beat its rhythm. It's the breath a singer takes before the final chorus.
Exactly. If the machine hates the void in a picture, wait until it encounters a quiet moment in a song. Are our ears about to be subjected to the exact same algorithmic exhaustion as our eyes?
Are we marching towards a future where every frequency, every decibel, every millisecond of a track is packed with generated sound because the machine is terrified of a quiet moment?
Will music just become a wall of maximum entropy static?
It's a horizon we are approaching very quickly, and it's something we all need to be prepared for. So until next time, remember the lesson of the visual grid. Keep your boundaries open, fiercely protect your negative space, and whatever you do, stay in control of the build.